I welcome you all to the 10th seminar of the second phase of the International PhD in Progress weekly seminar series. Allow me to introduce today's panel. I'm Dr. Nauman Rayat. I'm going to chair the session. My research interests lie within the area of constitutional law and politics in developing democracies. I'm joined by Masood Ahmed, who is an associate professor at the Leicester Law School, University of Leicester. Masood has been involved in various major civil justice reform projects in England and Wales, and has advised His Majesty's Court and Tribunal Service, Ministry of Justice, and the Law Society of England and Wales. He was appointed to review and evaluate a novel alternative dispute resolution procedure, the Professional Negligence Adjudication Scheme, and worked with senior members of the judiciary, including but not limited to Ms. Justice Carr and Mr. Justice Fraser, and leading barristers, solicitors, policymakers, and Association of British Insurers. Masood is discussant for today's session. Our peer commentator for today's session is Chidinma Mabagbo, who is a PhD candidate at the School of Politics and International Relations, University of Leicester. Chidinma, forgive me if I couldn't pronounce the African word correctly. I'm a non-African person. Our today's speaker is Cassandra Silcourt, who is a PhD student at the Leicester Law School, University of Leicester. Cassandra will present her PhD project titled, "What is the Impact of the Windrush Scandal?" A case study reviewing the social inequalities experienced by the Windrush generation. Sandra, you have 25 minutes for the presentation, which will be followed by 5 minutes for comments, questions of discussant and peer commentator, and 15 minutes of question and answer session by attendees. The floor is now yours. And please let me know if anytime you want to change the slides.
Yeah, thank you, Norman. Good afternoon, everybody. I am, I would say, a PhD infant at the minute because I am only just coming up to 3 months into this. So I think in terms of the standard of presentations we've had so far, perhaps mine might be a little bit more still being refined. So perhaps this session would be more about me gaining more from you guys in terms of feedback. What I want to look at is essentially the Windrush scandal. I want to look at the hostile environment that was created, and I want to look at how this happened and why essentially we have citizens of the British Empire who were rendered undocumented and unlawful citizens. And this at the minute is the title that I am proposing. So what is Windrush? Because I feel like there's an element of this word needs a little bit more exploration. The Oxford Dictionary says that Windrush is related or denoting the people who immigrated from the Caribbean to Britain on the British ship, the Empire Windrush, in 1948. But I feel like that needs a little bit more exploration. And essentially a short title of undocumented citizens of British Empire, because that's essentially what they were. Next slide, please, Norman. So I would like to scope down my project to look at the West Indian version of Windrush, because Windrush doesn't just affect certain Windrush. The scope of Windrush is quite broad, but I was thinking that I want to do something I'm passionate about, and the West Indian community I am a part of, and I am passionate about that. So I wanted to scope it down to just West Indian Windrush as the scope. There are 13 independent countries within the Caribbean. 10 of them were colonized by the United Kingdom. Windrush affected West Indians who essentially migrated to United Kingdom between 1948 and 1971. So I want to focus on like Antigua and people affected from Antigua, St. Kitts, Dominica, Trinidad, Barbados. I mean, there's a big misconception that most of the Windrush generation comes from Jamaica. So an element of my project would be to tackle the misconceptions as well, the misconceptions around Empire Windrush, the misconceptions around the terminologies being used, and the misconception that Windrush only affects Jamaicans. Next slide, please. I also think that changes that were designed to exclude needs a little bit more exploration. So in 1948, the Nationality Act introduced citizenship or the right to live and work here for British citizens and its colonies. Most of the people affected by Windrush fall under the citizenship by colony, if you like. And we've had subsequent changes in nationality and immigration law, which I think were designed to exclude, well, this might be a preconception of me, but I feel like they were designed to exclude, and that needs a little bit more exploration, especially when you look at things like the 1962 Act that was essentially called the Commonwealth Immigrants Act, which for me means that there's too many Commonwealth citizens coming over here, so we need to kind of close the doors a little bit and restrict that free movement. So I am trying to bring together a political scandal, migration, social justice, immigration and nationality changes, human rights, and how that plays out in real life terms for people, because Windrush is too big to call it a case study, but if you like, it could be considered as a case study for when all these different moving parts of the law go wrong. Next slide, please. So the scandal started to unfold in 2017. However, there are reports that go back all the way to 2013 where it was being highlighted that people are struggling to demonstrate their lawfulness to be here. What I find really interesting is the landing cards as well. So the landing cards were destroyed, and essentially I don't think a landing card on its own could prove the right to be here, but a landing card is an indicator that someone has come here. It gives you the date they came here, their name, their occupation, where they came from, and those were essentially destroyed. And they quoted data protection laws as a reason for destroying that. So I want to look at whether there was any legal infringements here or any technical infringements, because as someone that practices data protection law, I feel like actually destroying those cards was contravening to the data protection principles instead of upholding the data protection principles. I also want to have a look at children. So I need to look, why I want to look at this word Windrush and the Windrush generation and what it means is because I want to know how these labels are being applied, because you have people, adults that came over on their own passports, but you also have children that came over on parents' passport as well. I want to have a look at how they were labeled as a result of that journey, and if that's a generational, if that shows generational inequalities will occur because of what happened to the first generation, if you like. I don't know if I've explained that right, but that's kind of my thinking. Is there a generational element to the Windrush scandal? Can this be filtered down through generations as a result of children who came on passports or that kind of stuff. Next slide, please. There has been significant impact off the back of Windrush. It's been widely reported. There's a lot of material out there about the impact of Windrush. I would like to drill down a bit further into that because we have the likes of pro bono clinics or certain solicitors or immigration specialists that's been giving up their time to kind of help right these wrongs. But we also have a really complex system here where you're trying to maneuver the immigration laws. That's fine. We've got a Windrush task force that's been set up to help maneuver that. But then we also have the compensation scheme as well, which is actually placing a lot of the burden of proof on the individuals to prove their residency, to find documents that link back to what's happened to them. A lot of the Windrush victims were stripped of their rights to access healthcare, housing, benefits. So essentially, if you think about the fundamental, the foundation human rights of an individual, such as the right to have a safe home and that kind of stuff, because of the policy changes and what happened, essentially those rights were stripped back. And I want to be able to drill down to say, okay, we're hearing a lot about this is the social impact of it, Windrush, this is why it happened, but what about the law and the policies enabled this to happen? So I actually want to drill down and say, okay, this is why it happened, or perhaps this could be why it happened. There's been a review that came out, the Windrush Lessons Learned review. That review highlighted that this scandal wasn't an accident, that there was actually some challenges within departments that was against the processes that led to this. We had an independent report being published, and just earlier this year, the government is basically doing a U-turn on some of the recommendations that they put forward. So for me, I liken that to a systematic set of abusing. If you look at the UK's colonial past, they have I don't know what to call it, if it's a skill, because I wouldn't call it a skill, but for lack of a better term, the skill of going into another place, taking what they want, and then just disregarding after. So I actually want to put a different lens on this as well to say, okay, throughout the time when Caribbean migration was happening and increasing to the UK, it was because the Caribbean was quite unstable, and economically they weren't offering the best. So there was an element of Caribbean migrants are trying to leave this environment for a better life, but come to the motherland because this is my right. I'm coming to the motherland. But the motherland actually chose to give some of these countries independence because they thought the smaller countries won't be economically viable, because they didn't think that these small countries could survive on their own. So it's really particular that we had independence running alongside migration being Caribbean migration to the West Indian migration to the UK increasing, but not really linking it together. So I want to be able to find the gap there and link that together as well. Next slide, please. So for me, yeah, we've got the Windrush compensation scheme. We've got the task force. I would say the task force looks like it's working a lot more better than the compensation scheme, but the task force essentially is restoring your citizenship and giving you the documentation that says that you have the right to be here. The compensation scheme, on the other hand, is designed to compensate for those areas, those losses that you shouldn't really be able to put a financial value on, but you have to in order to submit a claim. And I just feel like when you put the two against one another, they're doing good work, but they're not actually righting the wrongs. And if you're not going to compensate me, or if the compensation scheme is not running as effectively as it should run, then it needs to be looked at. And also, I mean, I can't say that Britain's flawed and discriminatory immigration practices is not being highlighted, but how that goes back to Black and minority ethnic groups is something that I want to bring out a bit further. In my early reading about the history of Caribbean migration, I keep coming across this word of coloured migration, and I want to be able to make the links between you've come here and you've taken what you wanted to now let's stop the coloured from coming in, or subsequent changes in nationality laws when you've gone around the world, for lack of a better terminology, spreading your seed, and now you don't want anybody to come to the motherland. And like I said before, the fact that they're planning to abandon some of the key commitments means that this could potentially happen again. Next slide, please. Okay, so research questions at the minute. To what extent did the changes to nationality and immigration laws contribute and policies contribute to Windrush? What is the hostile environment, and how were West Indians who migrated during the period affected? Did these lead to any social inequalities? Why were those affected by Windrush classified as undocumented? And what social inequalities manifested because of their undocumented status? Were there any technical legal infringements because of Windrush? So were there any breaches of data protection laws, human rights laws, what those breaches were, how they came about? What has been done to address the Windrush and its effects? So looking at the compensation scheme, looking at the task force, and also looking at the pro bono clinics and the work of charity that's been going on to try and plug these gaps, and why we need that. And actually, yeah, I know it's pro bono, but what does it cost? Pro bono has a cost. Yes, I'm giving up my time, but actually, if this was something that you needed to pay for, would you be able to do it? And showing that it's not as simple as saying, okay, go through the legal process, because sometimes you don't have the economic backing to go through the legal process. And finally, I don't just want to do all of this and add to literature and say, okay, these are the gaps, this is what happens. I actually want to see if I can create a set of core principles that can be adopted by public authorities to stop similar incidents like this going on. The Home Office is a public authority. 4 key bodies within that: the British, the Border Force, HM Passport Office, Immigration and Enforcement, UK Visas and Immigration. They all should be working together. They all should have good record keeping. They all should have good information sharing agreements in place, record management. For this to happen, they all had to have had a hand in it. And as a public authority, they have duties, like a duty of care to the people that they look after. I want to see if we can learn from this and go a step further, where we can create a set of core principles that can be adapted so it reduces the chances of a similar incident like this happening again. Next slide, please. Or final slide, I should say. And then what I'm planning to do, so this cannot just be a doctrinal piece of research. I am wanting to bring together law, policy, look at generational impact, social impact. Are there any recurring links? So I am proposing to use a social legal methodology, because that means I can do multiple different things in one here. I can look at the law, and that can be strictly that doctrinal, but then I can move and look at policy. I can do a bit of interviewing, surveying, focus groups. I want to use thematic analysis from the data to try and pull out some trends, but I do need to do some balancing as well because I might have some preconceptions, being West Indian myself, how that's going to manifest throughout my research. I need to account for that and be able to counter any misconceptions or deep-seated prejudices I have due to my characteristics. I want to have a look at that, but also I want to be able to say the tough stuff. So maybe there's an element of people didn't do enough to secure or secure or document their right to be here indefinitely, or minds were focused on other things because coming from a West Indian background, there's so many cultural things in play. So maybe they could, maybe I need to say the tough stuff, like some of the victims could have have better record keeping or kept a lookout properly for what needed to be done to cement the fact that they had indefinite leave to remain here, or maybe culturally we don't keep records as we should. Like I've got aunties that keep things forever, and I've got aunties that say as soon as it comes through the door, throw it away. So maybe there's some cultural stuff that I need to look at, and that's going to be challenging. So I want to be able to balance that reflectively. And this is all I have for you so far. These are all my ideas. Well, not all of them. Some of my ideas, my key ideas contained in 8 slides. I've poured my soul out to you. Tell me what you think.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cassandra, for such an insightful presentation. Now I invite Masood Ahmed to share his comments. Masood, over to you, please.
Cassandra, thank you so much for that really interesting overview of your research. Sorry, the screen just all changed. I think that's because you stopped sharing the slides. So thank you so much for sharing an overview of your research, and it looks really, really interesting and obviously very, very current. I just had just a number of observations and comments. First of all, it's a topic that we actually touch on and explore in one of our modules in the first year, which I teach, which is called Analyzing Law. And we introduced the Windrush scandal as a case study, and we had questions around this for students in the first year to start to think more critically about the law and to consider how laws shouldn't necessarily just be taken as, yes, this is correct and this is right for society, and how we can actually actively discriminate against minority groups. And the Windrush scandal is an excellent case study for students because it gets them to really think about more critically about the impact of law on minority groups and what that means for those individuals, both from a legal perspective, but also from a psychological, economic, and a life perspective, because they start to learn about how the laws actually adversely impacted these people in terms of their mental health, in terms of their family structures, because people were torn apart and some people were deported, some people were put into prison by the Home Office. So they get to explore and look at all of those issues, and that's actually created a really nice, interesting sort of in-depth analysis from students, from my experience, because again, it gets them to think more critically, but it also gets them to think from a lot of different perspectives of the law. So I think that fits quite nicely into the last slide where you were saying your methodology is going to be wider than simply doctrinal. You're going to look at you're going to take a reflective approach, you're going to look at empirical data, you're going to speak to individuals who have been affected by this, including lawyers, I guess. So it goes beyond simply the doctrinal approach, which would only limit your research, I think, and would only sort of not really contribute what you really want to do in terms of the contribution you want to make to the literature. So in terms of the topic itself, and in terms of some of the questions that you've raised, it's really interesting, and I think it's going to hopefully make an original or practical, I think, original and practical contribution to the area. And I liked the last bit where you said you want to come up with a set of core principles to try to influence public bodies when they are managing either this case study or this situation or future situations as well. So I think what I was going to ask you, but you've answered the question anyway, is what is going to be the overall contribution? And I think that's quite a focused way to do it, and I think it can have wider and longer lasting impact if you can get to that position where you have these core principles. I've read the abstract as well, and obviously listened to what you were saying, and I just had a couple of questions. Maybe you can give your views on. The first one was from your abstract. You talk about outdated, complex legal frameworks on the one hand, which encourages racist practices by public authorities. So you touched on some of the legislation, the immigration legislation in your slides as well. So we have that on the one hand, and then you say, coupled with that is bad record management, lack of awareness for best information sharing, and the lack of protocols, which has contributed to this identity-based discrimination which you refer to. So my question is, to what extent, or which one is contributing more? I guess that's one of the issues you'll have to look at. Which one outweighs the other? Because I think that will then inform how you continue your research, and I think that can only be done through an in-depth doctrinal analysis of the law first. So all that legislation that you touched on, and the policy documents, because obviously that's part of it. That's what underpins this legislation. And then after that, can you, I think, go on to then consider the record management? But I'm just raising that issue now as something that you may want to think about, or maybe you have thought about and you want to share your views on how you're going to do that. And the other point was about the legal clinic. I think that's really excellent that you've raised that, and you've sort of picked that up, because I think, or pro bono, you mentioned pro bono, I'm talking about legal clinic, but I think you can use both. Because as you know, the University of Leicester Law School has got an excellent legal clinic and pro bono service. And one of the things that they have been doing is the Windrush, dealing with some Windrush cases. So I think picking up on that and linking that into the research will be a valuable way to at least open the door. I know you've mentioned there's some limitations around that. What are the costs around pro bono work and how that impacts? But I think that would be an excellent way in which you can sort of open the door into the empirical side of your research. So they're my overall comments, and just one sort of question around that, balancing, how do you look at the doctrinal part, and then move on to looking at the record management part.
Thank you for that. I'm going to take your questions, because I'm going to forget them if I don't, even if I made a note. Yeah, my brain works funny. Okay, so your first one, in terms of the outdated complex legal framework, I actually believe that doing a doctrinal piece on the analyzing of the law first is what I need to focus on to begin with. And I actually mentioned that to my supervisor, because I said the answers are in there. I know what the answers are, but I need to analyze the law to be able to show it. So that's where I'm going. The complex legal framework that are outdated follows on from that in my mind. That might change because, I'm only like a baby infant PhD student. So less than 3 months in, I might do some further reading, I might have some ideas, and it might change. With the legal advice clinic, I am actually one of the founding students that was working on this. So I'm one of the first cohort of students that worked on that project. So that's where my idea came from, linking in with them. I actually want to go home. I call it home. I like being there. I like being one of the students that worked on that project and started it. And I love seeing how it's progressed. So I'm going home. I'm going back to the project and use that as and actually not, I don't want to say use because it looks like I'm capitalizing on it, but the fact that I'm there and I've been a part of the project to help me to shape how the empirical side will look. But I'm hoping that I can get some guidance from my colleagues on the project and Laura as well to kind of like help me. But I do want to go out into the community as well. So like the African Caribbean Center, or go to the Race Equality Center and see how I can make links with these guys as well to try and look at it. And then all the key voices. So I'm overly ambitious, and I get that from being an only child. Okay. I was raised by a high voltage electrician, so I go after everything I want. Now, most of the voices that are prominent in the Windrush, I've already drafted an email to send to them. I'm basically going to say, I've been granted some funding to do this. I know you're a key prominent voice. I want you to give me your ideas, any feedback, comments. I know that I have to be careful about, what's the word, collusion or getting outside influences, and it's a politically hot topic, so I'm gonna have to probably work with the press office and stuff. And I know that I don't want to embarrass the university, so I have to be very careful, but I do want to make those kind of links as well to bring in for the originality, for me to actually live on these principles and rally through these principles in the end, because that's my passion. I'm a mini activist. I'm gonna, when I develop these principles, I am going to go and push these principles and blast them everywhere that I can with all the help that I can get. And to do that, I have to build a strong foundation to begin with. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Cassandra. I didn't know actually you were involved in the original setting up of the Windrush, so I think it's an excellent thing, and I speak very highly of it in my tutorials. And and I think you've got the right vision, and clearly you have the right energy to go forward with it. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Masood, for your comments. Thank you, Cassandra, for your response. Now I invite Chidinma to share her thoughts. Chidinma, over to you.
Hi, Cassandra. This is
Hello.
really fantastic. I think it's the first time I've ever heard of the Windrush. So it was an interesting read, and then hearing your presentation. So I had like 7 questions, but in your presentation you answered everything, because I'm like, okay, well, how is she going to do this? But you've answered everything, and it's really interesting. But the only comment I would want to add is you're actually working on a sensitive project, because once you get to meet the people, when they are talking with you, there's going to be expectations. And then once you get to the government angle, there might be barriers, resistance, and because it's like you're trying to bring to the fore what has been kept hidden somehow, So my thoughts or question or comment will be, how would you manage the people's expectation? Because once you start talking with them, they'll be expecting a miracle. And then the government, you're looking at a bit of resistance and barrier. How are you going to, you need to think about how you're going to have to deal with these two.
Okay, so I'm being sneaky when it comes to that. I am going to
Okay.
use the fact that I am West Indian and I
Okay.
come from a household that says, what happened in the house, stay in the house.
Okay.
When you go outside, don't talk my business to nobody. You can tell people I'm your cousin, but don't tell them where I live. Okay? I have the mistrust and the misconceptions that the Windrush generation will hold are all fundamentally part of my character because it's how I was raised. I am not here to overpromise anything. I'm a young scholar who's trying to highlight something. If you want to help me to highlight it and try and develop these principles to shape the future for the next generation, then help me do that. But in terms of access to the compensation scheme, then I can redirect you. I can signpost you, but I can't promise you anything because you know what it's like. You know what the system's like. That's essentially how I am going to approach this and be as open, as honest as that.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chidema, for your comments and Sandra for your response. Now I open the floor to question and answer, and we have already got 2 questions. I think actually it's not one comment, and then there are 2 questions. So one comment, the first comment is by Gifty Brew. Gifty, you want to talk, present yourself, or should I read the comment?
Please go ahead.
All right, okay. So if you see, she first appreciated, she is very impressed by your presentation, Sandra. You are already impressing people. So
Thank you.
our observation is that the outline seems very broad, and she wants to suggest that you'd probably consider narrowing down your scope as early as possible to make your contribution very impactful. And the first response, which reaction was that I have already posted that you just started in October 2023, and that impressed her more. So over to you. Would you like to respond, or should I go to the next question?
Thank you, Gifty. I appreciate you. But yeah, I am a PhD infant, I like to call myself. I am learning from all of you guys, and hopefully Norman will grant me the pleasure of coming back when I've refined it a bit more so you can see how it's developed. Like, I took this opportunity on because if I'm gonna make the change I want to make, I am going to need to get used to speaking on these platforms, even if my ideas are not formulated properly, and to be able to develop that skill. So that's why I jumped on board of this, even if I don't necessarily think I'm in a place to be presenting. I thought I'd just take the opportunity. So thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, thank you too. That is awesome. I'm really, really impressed, I must say, because just 3 months, and I mean, you've been able to chart this path, and I'm really impressed. So keep it up, and we are all here to support you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gifty, for your comment. Thanks, Cassandra, for your response. Harry, would you like to read your question yourself, or should I read it out?
Oh.
All right. Are you able to read it? Yeah, Sandra, have you read it?
Hold on.
Is it like, so allow me to read it. So on your comments on balancing the cultural questions relating to record keeping, wasn't the burden to do so on the state, especially after Windrush was an invitation to rebuild the UK and achieve state interest? So this is the first question. Now, the second question, which seemed to be connected to the first question, is, and if the state had such an obligation, wouldn't their failure to keep such records be disingenuous, reflecting a continuum of colonialist legal culture?
Okay, loaded. Trigger warning for my answer on this, Harry. There's a bit of both here. So first of all, yeah, I agree they shouldn't have destroyed those landing cards. I agree that they could have found another lawful basis to keep them. But being West Indian, I also know that we need to get better as a community of looking after the things that are important to us. Okay, where is your passport? I know where my passport is, but if I ask one of my cousins that question, they'll say, I don't know. Mom's got it or dad's got it. There's a balance here that needs to be highlighted. Culturally, we could have done some stuff to be better at documenting our existence here ourselves. It's not on everybody to do that. The other side of it is, yes, there was an invitation to come here. There was an invitation to come here, but there was also, I want a better life for myself, so I'm going to go there. So it wasn't all come here, come here, come here, and we'll document everything. There was an element of, oh, you know what? I'm going to the motherland because I want a better life for myself. So on that basis, where's the autonomy? Where's the responsibility? We have to be responsible individually. And that's why I say there's some things that's going to come out that's going to be hard to hear as well, not just for the public authorities, but also for people affected by Windrush. Does that answer your question? I'm a bit brutal, Harry. Sorry.
I think he somehow, yeah, okay, sounds good. He just commented, he said sounds good. Right, thank you. The next question is from Hakeem. Hakeem?
Cassandra, thank you very much. Just to echo that, it's very impressive that you are 3 months in and you have this level of overview and on what you want to do. What is not there is what you shouldn't do. What is there is, I have to echo these, and it's not surprising, and it's not a reflection negatively at all. If 6 months you had come with this, it would have been good. Still, is to ask you 1 or 2 things to help you, to guide you on probably how you want to shape the scope of the research. So if I may ask you, what's your background educationally and probably professionally? So what degrees, what areas do you have degrees in?
Okay, so I'm a law convert. I came from applied criminology.
Okay.
I went into the prison system for a bit to, well, not as a prisoner, but to work.
Don't worry.
And I didn't like it there. So then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out which criminal justice agency would be able to accept me with my characteristics, and didn't think I could find a home anywhere. So then I use my transferable skills to develop a career in data protection, and I'm actually working as a data protection officer. So that's my background. And then I went back to do my master's in law to climb the corporate ladder and fell in love with human rights law, and now I'm here. So I am been all over the place, to be honest.
And that background serves you very well for what you want to do. Very, very well. So it means you will have a good handle, hopefully, on being alert, and you already demonstrated in your response to ethical issues, and being prepared for also some challenges in terms of who you're going to interview, some of them emotional issues, and the ethics guidance, and the mixture of backgrounds in law, specifically in human rights and in criminology, means you are able to do social legal research well. But you will have to sit back, that's my suggestion, and quickly look at your presentation today and say to yourself, what specific thing drives this interest most? Is it about balancing and looking at what we should be doing late, what we could have done well, some of what had come out, and that is well placed. That's the work of an academic research or researcher. So no apologies for you taking that view. Or is it mainly about your conception of a deprivation of human rights? Or is it about government policy regarding immigration and the implication and even though you don't want to have a case study, but the Windrush experience as a focus to speak to that? because this will pull you in different ways in terms of methodology, in terms of just, for better use of a better word, for want of use of a better word, your subjects, who you want to or what you want to engage with. But the good thing is, I think the human rights angle, I was hoping that you have some handle on that. And since you have a a degree in that, that really is very helpful. But broadly speaking, you can talk around all of them, but you will need to quickly sit back and say, what is really driving your interest, so that you drill down, because you have come to this well prepared. And the earlier you drill down and realize that you can go around all of these issues, but it will not get a PhD that is a PhD. A focus less and less, more and more on less and less. That's what your PhD should be. More and more on less and less. And it can go in any of these areas, but you have to sit back after this presentation, think about it and say, if I was really being honest to myself, what really do I have motivation most to explore as an issue here that I want to, present? So that's my, but you have come well prepared, quite so, but you still need to go back. And lastly, an advice my PhD supervisor told me long ago, you can hope to change the world and all of these and try to climb very difficult glass mountains. But he said, you know what he said to me? Do what is easiest for you.
No, I don't take the easy route, Hakeem. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, there is. What is
My-
easiest for you will be what your skills best prepare you for, and the resources are there more readily for you to work with, because 4 years is a very short time, even for a PhD. All the
Well,
best.